listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in and checking out a new episode of my podcast, Straight to Video. My name's Rob Lane, and today was one of those left field cool hookups, which has been a reward of doing this podcast for the past couple of years. Through chatting to a friend, previous guest, and great supporter of all things Straight to Video, Derby-based film director and producer Dominic Burns a couple of months ago when he visited our 80s video shop, Dom was talking about a project he'd been producing and shooting in Manchester called 5 Pounds of Pressure. He said I needed to get together with the film's director, Phil Allocco, as we'd be sure to hit it off, as Phil was originally in an 80s rock band and now making films. Of course, that immediately sparked my interest, and upon diving in deeper, I discovered that Phil was the guitarist for MCA recording artists Law and Order in the late 80s and very early 90s. They were around at the exact time I was deep diving into hard rock, so that alone made me want to chat and hear his stories. Now, the fact that Phil has now forged a whole new career as a writer, director, and producer in the film industry only goes to make for an even more interesting conversation. So, today's show pretty much ticks all the straight-to-video boxes, so I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Before we chat to Phil, I need to let you know that today's episode of the Straight to Video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. It's used to create the podcast episode artwork you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market, so please check them out at affinity.serif.com. So if you want to learn more about Phil's career in both music and film, you can check out his website, philallocco.com, and look out for the new film, 5 Pounds of Pressure, which is currently in post-production. But for now, please sit back and enjoy my straight-to-video chat with Phil Allocco.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, Phil, how's it going?
Good to see you.
You too, man, you too. Looks like it's bright and sunny coming in through the window there.
It is very bright and sunny. It's actually an unusually beautiful day here in New York.
Excellent stuff. Whereabouts in New York are you these days?
I'm in Williamsburg.
Oh, cool.
Right by the bridge.
Oh, look at that for a view. That's incredible.
So it's a nice, beautiful day.
Amazing.
Not a gray, crappy day.
Is that your office? Do you work from there? Is that pretty inspiring looking at that?
It is inspiring, yes. It is my home office, which is now turning into my kids' playroom. You can't see it, but there's just like a million toys all over the floor around me.
Is that safe with all those guitars on the wall if it's kids' playroom?
He's only 18 months and he's constantly like, this one. I got to keep bringing him down from him.
Excellent stuff. So I appreciate you doing this for me. Very cool of our mutual friend Dominic Burns to put us in touch, constantly reminding us how small the world is these days. He's always been saying, like, I need to speak to this person or get this guy on the show. Then when he said he'd been working with a director who was in an American band in the late 80s, early 90s, I was like, okay, who is this? I need to find out.
That's great. Yeah, Dom is he's just a lovely, amazing guy. Such a talented, brilliant director in his own right. I just loved working with him, and he's a blast. He's so much fun.
How did the two of you hook up? Was there a mutual friend between the two of you?
You know, when the producers were putting together my film, 5 Pounds of Pressure, which is supposed to be based in New York. And I remember Zach is one of the main producers. He said to me, he goes, what do you think of Manchester? And I go, I think that's in the UK, if I'm correct. I go, what do you mean what I think of? It's a New York film. But they were thinking of shooting, to chase tax credits. And also there was a lot of benefits, they thought. And they were right. We wound up shooting in Manchester for New York.
Unreal.
It really did have that gritty, almost industrial kind of Brooklyn look that actually would be hard for me to find so much of it that hasn't already been exhausted, and feel cliche that you've seen. So it was fun to find a New York look somewhere else that hasn't been harvested,
So when the film comes out, you perhaps have some New Yorkers going, where was that shot? I don't know that place.
Yeah, that's so New York. I've just never seen, where is that? Definitely. And so that's how I met Dom, because he was the producer in the UK team. And we met through that. And we met in a very challenging position because it was like I was skeptical. We're trying to shoot New York and the UK. When we first started, we didn't know it was going to be Manchester. We're looking all over the UK for what could look like the right look. And I probably gave Dom a few heart attacks with how critical I was of stuff that, that I was saying, I don't know if it looks right.
Was there any other cities on the shortlist?
We were looking all over London. We were looking Liverpool. We were looking all over, even in Scotland. We were looking at Glasgow. We were looking all over the UK. And Dom is incredibly positive and insightful and really put together a great team in the UK for us. But, we had been working for a couple of months before I even got over to meet him in person, so most of our relationship began in the trenches, but over Zoom, which, as you talked about how small the world has gotten, the fact that you can have working relationships and make friends and be that close and not ever have met the person in person was, something new.
How long was you over in the UK for shooting?
I was there from September through November. I came back to New York mid-November.
What can you tell us about the film, where it's at in the post-production stages? Or
Yeah, we're in post-production. We're still editing, and we're getting close to getting near a cut that we're all happy with. Yeah, we're really happy with the film, and we have a great cast. So it was so excited to work with, Luke Evans, Rory Culkin, Alex Pettifer, Rudy Pankow, Stephanie Leonardis, and Savannah Stein is in it. And Zach Adams, who was also passionate and behind the film for a couple of years. So it's been a fun journey. And it was a really inspired shoot, I think. Everyone really brought so much to it. So I hope when people see it, I hope they like it.
Is it mixed with footage from New York, or is it primarily just all Manchester?
There's some footage we shot in New York, a small amount. Almost everything is shot in Manchester.
Incredible.
I probably shouldn't say that anymore. It's like, I'm really not going to talk about it anymore.
You've been someone who's been able to switch gears and become successful in a totally different career, both in creative fields, but going from recording artist to successful film director and writer, which is fantastic. I'd love to talk about that shift if I could, but also take things right back to let people know a little about the music. I was wondering, looking back now, all these years later, were there always seeds of you doing something in film, going back to when you were very young, do you think?
That's a great question. When I chose to do music, I grew up pretty poor and, I'm very old, way before the internet. So there wasn't exposure when I was a kid to how things work or how things are put together. So when I saw movies as a kid, I had no idea how people made those. I didn't know there were writers and directors and, but when I saw a band, I could see four guys playing instruments. It's transparent. I could see how it works. When I was very young, about 9 years old, I decided I wanted to be a musician, and that was what I wanted to do with my life. And I wanted to be a recording artist. And I had this whole thing in my head. By 18, I wanted to be signed as soon as I learned what being signed was. And then my backup was 24.
Yeah, you always get that, usually a 5-year thing.
Yeah, I had these ambitions that I was going to, and I started playing clubs at very young, started playing shows and even clubs at 13 and 14 with my bands early on. And I was just completely dedicated. I don't think I had a childhood in my teen years. I just was full on music, going to do this, committed everything. I had this belief that if I believed in enough and I believed in 100%, and I had no doubt of what I was doing, that the rest would fall in place. Don't know if that is a true thing or not, but that's what I was thinking. And eventually I did have a band and signed when I was 22 to MCA, which was a major label at the time. It was an exciting time in New York because there was a scene flourishing and there were local bands who would play with national acts back then. It was such a different world of music then. I feel like, this is before streaming and it was still kind of a roadmap. You play places, you sell out places, and
that gains the interest.
Yeah. And we were selling out places before we were signed. And I remember a big thing for us was playing with Guns N' Roses at Limelight. And that was right before we were signed. That was a really exciting show. And so we were exposed because we were playing with other bands, and clubs would have local bands play with these national acts. So we got signed, and then we did 2 records with MCA. And on my first record, we were touring with a band called Mother Love Bone. And you needed your tour. You needed your tour, and you needed MTV, and you needed all these things to sync up.
It's that roadmap again.
Yeah. And our tour fell apart because Andrew Wood from Mother Love Bone, he OD'd and died on the eve of that tour. It was Mother Love Bone. Law and Order was the name of my band. And Kills for Thrills, which was Gilby Clarke's band. So that tour never happened. And just the twist of fate, that really derailed the career trajectory of that band, but gave birth to eventually Pearl Jam, because there would be no Pearl Jam if that didn't happen. And then on our second record, I guess because of the relationship, and also I think we had a similar sound, more similar with what was coming in Seattle than what was going on at the time. So we had started touring with Pearl Jam on the second record, on 10. And then our label pulled our tour support and said Pearl Jam weren't going anywhere.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no. And we were playing with them, and we could see, that something magical was happening, that band would be the next. You could just tell. I saw it with Guns N' Roses, and at that point in my life, I could see it like, wow, that was the next thing that was hitting the zeitgeist, that the lightning was striking. And so to have our label tell us that and be so out of touch, and we knew we had this great tour, so they pulled us off of that tour.
What kind of venues was you doing?
This was in the beginning of the tour. It was on the West Coast. It was, like theater, some clubs.
I bet there was like a real electricity in there as well.
Oh my God. It was like, all you had to do was go to the show and you knew, oh my God, this is going to blow up for Pearl Jam. And our label were so inept.
What was the response to Law and Order from the Pearl Jam crowd? Was you going over well?
It was a fun tour, and it was still new. Pearl Jam hadn't blown up yet. They were just starting to, but you could see it was going to happen. It was just magical, and it was their time. And it was a fun tour. And when they pulled us off, I think when we went back and we realized they're killing our record. So for us, we were like, what's the point of being on this label? If an opportunity like that, to be on a tour like that. And that doesn't mean we would have blown up for that tour, but obviously you want to be on that tour as long as you can. And it could have launched us into other tours. So we felt that we wanted to get off the label. And our manager at the time, which was Scott Koenig, who passed away last year, which is very sad for us, but he was with Rush Management, which was Leor Cohen and Russell Simmons. They were our managers from the beginning. They believed that they could get us, that other labels wanted us or give us a deal. So we went bankrupt to break our contracts out of MCA and to get off that label.
Do you remember how much you owed MCA? Can I ask?
Who knows? It's not that we needed to go bankrupt because of the money, because in the way it worked, you owed money, but only your record sales would go towards that. It's not like you owed them out of your pocket.
Yeah.
But we probably owed them, I don't know, over $1 million, whatever, who knows? We made videos a lot.
Yeah.
But we went bankrupt to get out of that. And then by the time we had another record, Nirvana came out. And then the music industry changed even further. And we were lumped in with the kind of the older, I guess the labels just thought we got dropped. They didn't know we fought to get off. Who tries to get off a major label? We were crazy for doing that.
Who were your label mates at the time? Who else did MCA carry?
Spread Eagle, who are still good friends after all these years. They're still touring around.
You even directed a video for them recently,
yes,
right?
Yeah. Because Rob, I love Rob and Ray, and they're great guys. So Spread Eagle, there was also the Tragically Hip, is a band from Canada, and we all had the same A&R person, Bruce Dickinson, who was Bruce Dickinson, on SNL with Christopher Walken, More Cowbell, that's the Bruce Dickinson. That was my A&R person. He was amazing. He was in an impossible situation at MCA. He was amazing. We loved him. But by the time we had the next record, we couldn't get signed again. And then we just decided to break up and move on.
Brother Kane were a band which transitioned. At times they were lumped in with the hard rock stuff of the late 80s, early 90s, but they managed to forge that bluesy path. You guys could have done that as well.
You look back, I think if we just kept going, maybe something else would have happened. But I think in our mind, we just kind of felt like it's very hard, especially in New York. There is no funding anywhere to help you. And after that, I don't know, we just kind of went on to the next thing. So then I started another band, and then I decided to sing. I used to play guitar in that band, and I got to sing and Dogma. And then we got signed with Island Def Jam, and We did 2 records with that band, and then that band got dropped. And then I was done. I was like, because the music industry had been changing. I had been signed for 10 years. I had been playing my whole life at that point. I think I was getting in my 30s, and I was like, I just felt the industry was contracting, but I didn't know that. I just thought my career or my opportunities were contracting.
Totally different nowadays. Back then, I mean, I've even done it. I've like given myself that 5-year thing. Oh, things are going all right. Let's give it another 5 years.
Right.
But back then it was like, oh, by the time you're 25, if you've not made it, you're kind of done. But now that whilst the music industry isn't perhaps as well, the big record deals aren't there anymore, but you don't have to put an age limit on now. You can become that independent musician if you're focused enough to keep going.
Well, I'm saying all these things like they're facts, like these ideas of like, hey, it was done. I mean, there's a lot of things we tell ourselves, right? There's a lot of things that we limit and say, okay, well, I got signed. I can't get signed again. But there's a lot of limitations we say, or I say at that time, I felt done with it because whatever reason I gave myself. But for the very same doors that I was closing on myself, when I went into film, I had the opposite perspective. I was just like, I remember when I wanted to get into film, I was already in my mid-30s. I'm like, what would you do if you could do anything? And I knew at that point, I had been exposed to video shoots and obviously knew much more, and still loved film, watch films like all the time. And then I thought to myself, oh, I'd love to direct film or be a director.
Is that almost like what you were saying when you saw the band on stage for the first time? It became transparent. So once you got signed band, you was making videos and you could see how videos were made. So that gave that some transparency, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think for a while I felt like, wow, I wish I knew that. I wish I was exposed to that. I asked myself, what would I want to do? I said, that's what I want to do. And I saw myself going, you can't do that. You're too old. You're too this, you're too that. And that's when I really had that kind of breakthrough in my own mind going, well, look at this. Look at all the things I'm telling myself I can and can't do. And I haven't even done anything. Realized I was so afraid of whatever failure again in something that I was the only one stopping it. So I figured I'll just try it. What the hell, I mean, you never know what could happen. So I flipped my perspective instead of being so rigid about what the possibilities are and just started delivering coffee on set as a PA in my 30s.
Wow. So it's literally going back down to grassroots.
Yeah. And I worked my way up in the commercial industry under a director and started making short films and literally doing everything, learning.
Asking lots of questions.
Yeah, no, I was a PA, I was production manager, I was an editor for years. I really feel like learning all the different aspects and having a physical experience with those things really helped me to really understand what I'm doing, where I am now, It's just I did it as an old person.
You've got this amazing view looking out into New York, and you say you're in Williamsburg.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You grew up in Williamsburg, right?
I did. I grew up in Williamsburg and couldn't wait to get out. It was a total crappy place.
Was it the New York we perhaps pictured in our heads when we saw films in the 70s and early 80s?
Yeah, when you see Taxi Driver, I mean, it was like that. It was horrible. I mean, it was really dangerous, lots of violence, a lot of experience with death in my teen years. But I wanted to get out. And then once I got out, I swore I'd never come back. But what happened here, unbeknownst to me at the time over the years, I was always living in East Village. And because it's an industrial part of Williamsburg, where I am now, so this was all like factories and zoning like that. When they changed the zoning, they literally just put a whole new city on top of it. They just built all new community here. And some of those beautiful warehouses and stuff became great restaurants or lofts. And also the creative community, it used to be like the East Village used to be where all the arts. West Village was if you were a painter and you were pursuing that type of art or music, there were all the CBGBs and all these great venues. And all the musicians now have they kind of got pushed out of Manhattan and then they started being in Brooklyn and Williamsburg. So you want to go see shows, you want to see art. So this whole neighborhood had changed. And when I had come back and saw it, a friend took me here. They're like, oh, we got to go to Williamsburg. I'm like, what? Why would anyone ever go there? And then when I came and saw it, I was like, wow, I just loved it. Had that mixture of something new and exciting, but at the same time, something familiar. Where I live now, I used to come with my brother to watch the fireworks, and it was burnt out piers, cars sticking out of black water, probably bodies dropped here by the mob. It was an ugly, dangerous place, but it had a great view of the city. And my brother used to always say, wow, wouldn't it be great to live here? Look at the view here.
He had some foresight right there.
Yeah. That probably drew me towards the place when I saw it and I saw the view. I was like, oh, yes, have to live here.
Do you know what's standing where your house used to be, where you grew up?
I do. It's in some movies. They used to shoot some crazy movies here. What used to be my house in the movie Jacob's Ladder, near the end, when he's meeting, I forget the character's name, but he's basically telling him about how they drugged these soldiers, and giving him about how the army experimented with LSD. There's a scene where he's walking on the water, and it's right in the background where my house eventually going to be built.
How was Manhattan for you growing up? Was it scary, exciting, normal?
Oh, exciting. Manhattan, I don't know what it's like if you're not from New York, but I would imagine it's an exciting place that people want to go. So as a kid, I remember my dad taking me into Manhattan when I was a kid. My dad and I had this little thing where we watched the World Trade Centers from my house in Williamsburg. We had a view where you could see, because Williamsburg is very close to Manhattan. So we used to see it be built in the sky. And I remember him taking me there before they were finished. And he snuck up with me to like the 80th floor, and there was nothing there but guys with hard hats, no walls, just windows. And then finally one guy was just like, what are you doing up here with this kid? Get out of here. I just like trespassed up there. But I used to love going into, especially Lower Manhattan, all the big buildings where, the buildings are so tall, the sun doesn't even hit the ground. It's in shade until the sun is like right over you. So, I always loved Manhattan. And of course, as a teenager, and then when we were playing shows and being in a band, all the, great clubs like Limelight, which was built in an old church, the Ritz, all these great clubs. And there was a great scene. There was a club called Cat Club. So every night, you would have like a place where everyone went.
Mondays you go to this place, Tuesdays you go to
Right. So Wednesday you would go to Cat Club, Sunday you would go to Limelight, stuff like that. So exciting. Yeah, it was so much fun. Loved it.
You mentioned earlier you started playing like super early. Am I right? Your first band was Prowler.
First band was Prowler, when I was a kid, yeah.
That's that classic first band name. Do you remember the logo? Did you have a logo?
We had a logo. I drew the logo, and this little kid's drawing of a logo, yeah. I remember we had my first show ever. This is kind of funny. I think we must have been like 12 or something. And we used to play in my friend Eddie Nappy, who went on to then, he was in this band Handsome. He was a talented guy, but we were playing since we were little kids. We were in school together since first grade, and we used to play in his basement. His parents had a house, and they had a basement where we would rehearse. So my dad worked for the post office. So he took the post truck. Well, you're not supposed to have anyone in the post truck, but he moved all our gear.
That was the tour van.
Yeah, it's like a van. And he brought us, and we made a deal with the church to play in their auditorium. We said we'd give them half the money, and they seemed to be happy once we talked money.
Where was that?
In the neighborhood.
Yeah.
In Williamsburg. We put on a show, right, and put up flyers all over the neighborhood. Didn't know this is basically what I would be doing for the next 10 years, putting flyers up everywhere. I don't even know where the idea came from. We didn't know that that's what bands do, but we did it. And we put up all these flyers in the neighborhood, and we had like 500 kids show up to this show. It was a great show, and we got paid money. It's like, I had no idea it would be 10 years before I got paid again like that. That show was great. We were like known in our neighborhood. So like if there was a gang that wouldn't beat us up because they're like, oh, you guys were in that band.
Legendary on your first gig.
So, yeah, it was very cool. And my dad worked the door, it was so funny,
Dad, can we paint the Prowler logo on the side of your mail van?
On the New York Post truck.
Yeah. Do you remember anything from the set? Was you just doing cover songs?
No, we had our own originals mixed with some cover songs. I remember some of the songs we played, and we looked just like Law and Order. We're playing some Skinner, some Zeppelin, probably. I don't even know what else.
What was it, a 4-piece?
That was a 5-piece band.
Do you think the music bug was there right then? Like, I'm playing to 500 people. First gig.
Oh my God. We were like, actually, you know what? I think at that point, at that young, it was just like, yeah, I think that's the turnout we expected. When you're like, your head is so...
This is how it works.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
We put flyers out. Of course they're going to come.
I'm surprised it's not bigger.
Did that become your identity from that point on then?
I think it did, probably for better, for worse, right? I think probably a negative thing of it is that you feel that you're nothing without that, because it's so intertwined with who you're, especially your teenage years as you're developing your identity. That was so much. So when I did walk away from music altogether, it really did feel like a death. It felt like, wow, who am I without that?
It's so ingrained in you by that point.
So I think I also was excited to get on the other side of that, because then it was exciting to be like, wow, so I'm not any of those things. So you kind of feel this like, wow, then I'm nothing that I'm identified with now either. So it's a freeing feeling eventually. But it was like a death. I mean, I definitely think I mourned it like a death. And it was very hard. It wasn't.
It was scary.
Oh, yeah. Everything. It was always scary. It was like, I've never come from any sort of financial background with any support or any kind of financial literacy, any of those things. It was always walking a tightrope without a net. There was nowhere for me to go if things didn't work out. It would be living on the street.
Were your parents always supportive of the creative direction?
They were. Yeah, they were always. I think they were afraid in the beginning, as you would be for your kids.
Especially during like the 70s and 80s.
Oh,
you got to get that proper trade.
Yeah, but I think they saw that I was so determined that it probably made them feel, well, at least he really knows what he wants to do. This is a funny story. I was always like, I'm never doing anything else. And I didn't want to go to college. That was a big thing. I'm like, I want to get into my career as soon as I can. I want to get playing.
I've got these 5 years. Got to do it now.
I got to get on this. So when I was graduating from high school, my brother is a scientist.
Oh, thanks, brother.
Right. So obviously they helped him through college. And I always was like, I'm never going to college, never going to college. Right. So I go to my parents on graduation day, where now, I didn't get signed at 18. I'm graduating. I think at this point, my band or whatever I was working on had broken up. I had there was not a good future looking ahead for me, and I had nothing right to work with. And I remember going to my parents, like.
You had no bargaining.
Nothing. I go to my parents. I'm like, you don't have any kind of, something stashed away in case I want to go, some money for college. And my dad laughed. They laughed. They thought I was joking. They're like, and I was like, oh, okay, all right. Guess I made my bed. I just got to really go for this.
How long after then was the formation of Law and Order? Did you join Law and Order?
Yeah, Law and Order was a different band. Shane and Rob were from another band, and then they were looking to put something together. And Scott, who was our manager eventually, he was a genius with music. He really was. I had a relationship with him. Sean had a relationship. Sean and I were trying to put a band together. Funny enough, it was called Nirvana. That was the name of the band before we heard of Nirvana. It's so silly. It never became anything. And then he joined with Shane and Rob. And then I was still trying to do my own thing. And I didn't want to play what they were doing. And Scott and my good friend Steve, who's Steve Carr, who's a director and a producer on 5 Pounds. We've been together for years.
Goes all that way back.
Goes that way back. He talked me into it. And then I was like, okay, I'll go try it out. It's funny. You never know how your opportunities or how life evolves. And I look back then, that was my greatest experience in music. And it was something I was fighting, kicking, and screaming the whole way. And then, eventually became my dream band. And it's funny when I look back then too, I feel like I was probably approaching it more like a director in the film industry, because, when you had a band, your band is your cast. I was always trying to find, when I was younger, find the right band, find the right pieces, find the right singer. So you're auditioning and you're checking things out. And then you're worried about the aesthetic. I remember on just the way we would dress, or the philosophy behind it, or the lyrics we were writing, or the album cover, everything became this production as if you're trying to make, so it's funny. I look back at it now and I see a lot of similarities to what I do. Like when I left music, I just didn't want to go back to playing clubs again or playing in a band. I really loved the production of making a record. And when you make a film and you're getting together, it feels more like that feeling. You're going away to some exotic place. You have all your actors and you have all your crew and and you're trying to do what you think is impossible.
You like that scale.
Yeah, it's just so exciting. And it feels like that. So I feel like I've been doing the same thing in a weird way.
You mentioned there was a really good scene. I mean, everything was exploding on the West Coast, but there was still a good scene on the East Coast as well. We mentioned Spread Eagle. I think you did some stuff with Skid Row. What other East Coast bands?
White Zombie I think we did our show together with them. Then, when we were getting signed, you would play shows and your A&R person would come. And I think we did 3 shows. One of the shows was together with Skid Row at L'Amour's, and another show was with White Zombie in New York. I think he came to, because they want to see you on different nights to see if it's a fluke, if they think you're good. Yeah, so I remember White Zombie, there was Circus of Power, there was Princess Pang, there was, oh my God, there were so many bands.
I want to know if you played with Danger Danger or Trickster. That's what I
We
want
did
to
play
know.
with Trickster. We did play together. I remember those guys, Trickster, and they were on Mechanics, which was with MCA, like a subsidiary of MCA. Danger Danger, I don't remember playing with them. I remember seeing them. But Trickster, we passed each other a bunch.
What were your earliest experiences of the West Coast as a musician? Was that a whole different world and vibe to that of New York?
We did our second record on the West Coast. It was a different vibe. Yeah. I mean, being a New Yorker, you kind of think of LA as like, oh, it's going to be the West Coast version of New York. I was surprised when I first went out there that it looked like New Jersey to me. It was like all laid out, very suburbia, drive everywhere. But we had a great time in, playing the Whiskey. That was a great club. I mean, you're just excited to play places that you've heard about. I don't remember it being so different. Yes, there are differences, but, like I meant bands or if you went to a club, it was like the same kind of vibe, same kind of crowd.
How is it going back there now as a filmmaker? Do you have flashbacks or has it all changed so much? LA and Hollywood just seems to be changing all the time.
Yeah, well, I've spent a lot of time in LA over the years. What I think has changed, San Francisco has changed a lot. For some reason, I've always been traveling. And then when I got into directing, I do a lot of commercial work. And I spent a lot of years just traveling, like touring shoots that like were 10 weeks long and be in different cities. And, so it's kind of weird that as my life kept changing into different career things, doing commercial stuff or music or film, it's like I wound up still touring.
Again, it's those similar parallels.
It really is. It's kind of odd. I did more touring as a director than I did as a musician.
We spoke about it a little bit, but that thing where you said you leave the music and you had to let go of it, being a musician and moving in a new direction, losing the identity you had most of your life through school, your early 20s. You were the musician, you were the rock guy. Was there anybody who gave you the confidence, the push to say, try this new thing?
I remember my girlfriend at the time, who was very supportive, very wonderful person. But I remember telling her that I had decided I'm going to become a director or whatever. And she was like, out of your mind? And we both had a big laugh about it. But she was supportive. But I think her initial reaction was like, what do you, I just came in off the street like, oh, I just decided that's what I'm going to do. But it was a weird coincidence. I mean, I didn't just like, oh, I want to do this. I had already started making some films. I did it for fun. In between my music career and my directing career, or the beginning of that industry, I was part of an internet company. I lied my way into AOL.
Are you a good blagger? Are you pretty good at the blag?
Not really. I mean, but I needed a job. I needed money desperately. And I just figured I'd lie. And I never even turned on a computer, and I got a job. I got a job trying to teach schools how to get online with Scholastic, which was part of AOL.
So this was right as, I guess, when things were just about to go boom.
Just the beginning. It was just the beginning. This is like 95. And so I remember taking home a book and trying to understand what it was. And then I had to go in, and I remember the guy who hired me said, I'm not going to be in, but when you come in, just get familiar with our systems. And, and I'm just standing in front of like this computer, like I'm like an ape looking at this thing, like I don't even know how to turn it on. And I remember there was this girl who was very, very sweet. And I said, yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't usually work on these computers. I work on, and she's like, shut up. You're such a bullshit artist. Here's how you turn it on,
Oh, she got you figured out straight away.
Oh, totally. And helped me. And then eventually I wound up running a department for a little bit, and I got to hire my friends who were also musicians who needed, But, it's funny, over the years, I do think musicians and computers somehow, maybe it's because of the way our brains are wired with music or instruments or gear, but as musicians, seem to take to computers pretty quick. So I taught myself programming. I taught myself at the time JavaScript, object-oriented programming, and doing some stuff. And then I was was doing animation. Then Sean, who had a computer background, I got him in that company as well. And then he left, started his own company called Media Jelly. And then I worked there for a while. So I started making films because I was doing animation for the internet and stuff. And then I thought animating takes too long. I'd rather just shoot something because I love the format of scripting. I just loved that. I don't know, when I saw it, it just excited me, like hearing a song. When I looked at a script, I was just excited to play with that structure. So I wrote a script and then I started shooting short films. And so at that point, I shot a short film and I realized when I did my first short film, which is a little joke film with my parents in it, I just loved it. I knew I was like the first time I got excited about something like when I was in music. And then I felt like, yeah, I want to do this. I really want to do this.
Does anybody particularly inspire you as a filmmaker?
Oh my God, yeah, of course. First of all, I have to say, before I started making films, like everyone, you watch a film and you trash it, or you're like, yeah, I would do this and I would do that. Now I feel like anytime I see a film, no matter what level of quality, no matter what I see, I'm just so in awe of, I know what it takes and what you have to go through to make it. So it is very rare that even with the best people involved, we've all seen amazing casts and directors and the best people in the industry, doesn't mean they're going to make a good film. So making a good film it's really a mixture of having great people, having a great plan, a great script, everything. And then you still need some magic. You still need some luck. You still need something magical to happen. I guess same as music, right? I mean, you put super bands together where it should be amazing.
How often does that work, those supergroups?
Yeah, right. And it doesn't work. So you just don't know. There's always this intangible component of it that you're chasing. We always joke, we hope the film's gods bless us when we make a film, that they're going to come and visit our set and give us something magical. You really hope you capture some of that. But yes, I'm going off on a tangent, but yes, I love Paul Thomas Anderson's work. Everyone loves Kubrick's work and loved Woody Allen's work when growing up. I just love comedy. I love Scorsese's work. I mean, there's so many directors. I mean, every time I see, and every year you'll see movies that come out just are mind blowing, because now I have a greater appreciation of how hard it is. So it's not like the more I do it, it's not like I go, now I see it. It's easier. It makes me more in awe of what they pull off.
What was the first film that blew your mind as a kid, and where did you see it at?
2001 blew my mind as a kid. My brother turned me on to that. I'd say Slaughterhouse-Five was another, and then subsequently Kurt Vonnegut's work in writing. But the film blew me away as a kid. I think those really moved me. And my brother, who's very brilliant, and he's 8 years older than me.
The scientist.
Yes, the scientist. He put these films on when I was like a kid, and I'd be like, what the heck? And I also loved Rod Serling. I loved Twilight Zone. I loved Planet of the Apes when I was a kid.
Was it Jordan Peele did the Twilight Zone recently?
Yeah, I haven't seen it. And I loved Jordan Peele when he was on his TV show, but I haven't seen a lot of, I've seen some of the movies he's done now, but I haven't seen the Twilight Zone. It'd probably be weird for me to see it because I'm so attached to the originals, and Rod Serling.
Are you a fan of the film from the 80s?
No, I was always only liked Rod Serling's early stuff. I didn't like the remakes of it. I just loved that they did so much. You had a half hour, right? Except for one season where on the fourth season, I think it was, they did an hour-long episodes. But other than that, they were all a half hour. They had very little to work with. Right? The sets were very minimalistic and lighting was minimal. And they were able to pull off a paradigm shift where you never saw it coming. And that's what the whole thing's about. You're sitting there going, how are they going to surprise me at the end? And they were still, for most of them, very successful at doing that, even when you're looking for it. And I just think that's so brilliant. I feel what I've learned from Rod Serling, and I always think about Planet of the Apes, the original, which is such a Rod Serling ending. The ending is just the most important thing of a film for me. It has to justify the whole journey.
Oh, yes. I always say that, like, all these films can be great, but if it dips at the end, it's like almost like a waste of time. It's like somebody running a race and winning all the time, then just tripping up right at the end.
Absolutely. And that ending, you could actually watch a film going, I don't even like this. I don't like this. And then if it lands an ending, it might make you go, oh my God, I didn't realize how great this whole thing was, And then it becomes something you watch over and over again. So I feel like the ending, it has to justify the whole journey. That's one thing I think Rod Serling is like the master of the ending, because he's done that every would do that every week, have another Twilight Zone. It was just amazing to me,
Well, talking about endings, I'm going to leave it there, Phil. So thanks ever so much for taking the time to chat with me. I've really enjoyed it. It's been very, very cool.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I had such a great time, and it's so great to meet you. And I hope we get to meet in person someday.
Thanks so much to Phil Allocco for taking the time to revisit his old hard rock days, as well as talking movies right here on the Straight to Video podcast. That one was a lot of fun for me, and I really enjoyed hearing about his journey and coming to terms with leaving one career, which was so important to him, to forge a path in another. Shout out to Dominic Burns for the hookup. You can listen to my chat with Dom, which was equally as fun, back on episode 25 of the show. That's way, way back, but certainly worth checking out, as Dom shared some fun stories on that show. That episode can be found along with over 200 more over at stvpod.com, where you can also pick up some straight-to-video merchandise and listen to some STV music. Fingers crossed for a new movie soundtrack tune done in the straight-to-video style later this year. So that's all for today's show. I truly appreciate everyone who listens, both old and new, and please consider sharing this episode if you enjoyed it. But until we chat again, take care and speak soon.